Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
The old shift bus, traversing potholes and potholes, slowly divided the customs road. Max was rocking a little from the constant jolting, and he fell asleep and slept almost all the way to the plane. A little more and I'll be home, he thought. How I missed being home in a distant little town with no decent job. His wife and 6-month-old son were waiting for him. So Max got a job as their commodity in the northern oil platforms. It was a good job, very good by the standards of their small town. Yes, he was away often and for long periods of time. But when he came back, he could spend all his time with them. And the money he earned was enough to meet all the current needs of their little family. So he and Maria thought they were very lucky. And they weren't the only ones. All their friends and acquaintances, both from school and from the institute, always talked about it. There were, however, those who were jealous. But what could they do without it? Envious Max and Maria tried not to communicate. And in general, they liked friendly companies and noisy parties. In their recent college days, they had rocked the sessions. Max smiled, remembering fondly how almost the whole group piled into their small one-room apartment after exams. And as soon as they could fit, they slept on the couch, on the armchairs, right on the floor. 8 people could fit on one mattress, I swear. Now, of course, those times are gone. Goodbye, student parties. Although now the apartment is much bigger than a 3-bedroom, nice in a new house. Last year, they took out a mortgage, but now they're more like having warm gatherings in a cozy kitchen. Max was quite happy with it, because everything has its time. They have served their time, and now they are really family people, young parents, and little Chuck was soon to be 6 months old. Max felt a rush of fatherly pride. He has a real family, a beautiful, loving wife and son. And most importantly, he's a man. The head of this family can provide for his loved ones with everything they need. Wasn't that a blessing? Barely waiting for boarding, he made his way through the crowd of passengers to the exit of the airfield, one of the first to leave. He wanted to get home as soon as possible. He did not call a cab. Despite his good salary, he tried to save money. Everything to the house, everything to the family. "Hey, sir," one of the drivers called out to him. "Get in, I'll take you for a ride. With that kind of money, how can you take a bus?" Bullshit. Max brushed him off and took his 2 luggage with him by the whistle. Here were his clothes and work clothes, and all kinds of things he needed on watch, and most importantly, gifts for his loved ones. Maria and Chuck bought in NY. While I was waiting for my connecting flight, I went to the nearest big store. I could never find such things at home. In joyful anticipation, he fled to his 3rd floor. Unable to wait for a busy elevator, he did not ring the bell, in case Chuck was asleep, and quietly opened the door with his key. "Beloved, I'm home," he said softly. There was no sound in response. The apartment was very quiet. Good plastic windows, installed shortly before the birth of the baby, did not allow street sounds. It must have been raging again in the night. And now it's still falling asleep. Max guessed, in order not to wake Maria, who really often tormented, not sleeping with a restless baby. He quietly undressed, put the bags, and went into the kitchen to turn on the kettle and eat something from the road, waiting for his wife to wake up, and when they get up, they will be glad that he is already home. When he came in, he shut the door so as not to make too much noise. He pressed the lever of the electric kettle, fairly looked around their cozy, clean kitchen. Maria was a good hostess and kept everything in perfect order. Then he headed for the refrigerator. Knowing that she was sure to have something tasty prepared in advance among the motley magnets on the upper door, his gaze was fixed on a simple white sheet of paper, a small one from Maria's note-taking pack, on which she often wrote what she bought or left for him or her mother, who often came to help. Various touching notes. What have we got here? Max, without looking, tore off a sheet and put it on the table, while getting cutlets and salad out of the fridge. He heated himself up some goodies in the microwave and comfortably. Once settled at the table, he finally took a look. What's in the note? As he began to read it, a chill ran down his spine and creepy goosebumps ran up his spine. On the smooth blue piece of paper was written "Goodbye, Max. Our marriage was a big mistake. Don't look for me, I'm not coming back." For a minute, he just stared blankly at these letters written in ordinary pen. Here was the pen lying there on the table, and not a single thought entered his astonished mind. Then he suddenly smiled and thought to himself, "This, I take it, is a practical joke." Maria was a very funny woman, always inventing something for birthdays and holidays, always arranging funny contests, funny lotteries, all sorts of events. But despite the fact that he guessed her insidious plan, Max was still kind of bad, uneasy. And as if in confirmation of this premonition, suddenly sounded restless, more often cries of a baby from the bedroom. And then another and another. He cried out in a huff, as if no one was there to soothe him. Max jumped up sharply and rushed into the bedroom. He swung the door open so hard that it slammed against the wall. Chuck's answering cry was filled with fear and despair. And in the bedroom, except for his little frightened one, sitting in his crib with eyes swollen with tears, there was no one else. Sonny, Max's Sonny, rushed to him. He took the baby in his arms. He was all wet, and his diaper was so full that it was no longer performing its function. What on earth is going on? Max rushed around the room grabbing things. He put the baby on the table, unwrapped it, then took it to the bathroom to wash it properly. While he performed all the necessary procedures, his hands were shaking like a fever. Easy, easy. He soothed Chuck, while he himself felt like this. It's time to forget too, out of despair. Where is Maria? What could have happened? She couldn't have abandoned their son to her fate. There must be some logical explanation. All he had to do was find it. At last he was finished with the child. Now it was time to feed him. Carefully he sat Chuck back down in the crib, where he had already replaced all the linens. Max reached into the kitchen cabinet for the baby food. While he found it, while he mixed it all properly. About 20 minutes passed, and for those long minutes Chuck screamed incessantly, as if complaining to his father and trying to tell him something. "Hush, hush, son. We're going to eat now." Max brought the boy into the kitchen, sat him in the high chair, and gave him a bottle of formula. The baby pounced greedily on the food, hurriedly devouring the contents. Max, meanwhile, dialed the number of Maria, who was unavailable, and then her mother. "Miranda, it's me." "Max, yes. Good morning, Maria. Not at your place by any chance?" "No, the thing is, she's not at home." "I'm here. Chuck is alone." "No, I haven't called anyone else right away. Do you know if she was going somewhere and didn't get back in time?" "No, you can call her." "I tried, but the number's not available." "What?" "No, we didn't have a fight. I just got back." "Okay, I'm waiting for your call." He ended the call. But what have we eaten? After taking the empty bottle from his son, Max took him in his arms and started carrying him around the apartment, humming lullabies and rocking him. After about 5 minutes, my mother-in-law called and said she couldn't reach Maria either, and sobbing, started asking Max again what happened to them. "I don't know." She left some kind of strange note. My mother-in-law, of course, came as soon as she could. Oh, and she read the piece of paper. Grabbing her heart, she said she had to call an ambulance and the police. Max already understood that without her, because he had just finished calling all his friends and acquaintances. In addition, there was something that tormented him, something that kept him awake in the whole ridiculous and frightening situation, but he couldn't figure out what it was. In the end, he called every hospital and morgue. He left Chuck with his mother-in-law, and he drove himself to the police station, where he was told over the phone he had to write a statement. Write the last name, first name. Leave a picture, describe the circumstances under which she went missing. How much time had passed? The desk surgeon on duty asked him. I don't know exactly. Chuck seems to have been in bed for hours. Alone. No signs of struggle or violence were found in the house. All the valuables were in their places, I think. I wasn't really in the mood, but you'll have to come and see. What about your wife's things? Maybe she took something herself. Where's her passport? Actually, she always carries it in her purse. Max wondered. But I'm not sure the bag is there. Your task is to check everything carefully, said the policeman. We will put together an APB on your report. If she's got into any trouble, we'll find her, don't worry. But what if she decided so herself? And he pointed expressively at the note. We can hardly help. That's not what Max said. She would never do that. But think about it. What kind of mother abandons her baby? Are you sure that note was written by your wife? The policeman asked him. Yes, her handwriting, Max nodded. Except that he suddenly realized what it was that had struck him as strange from the very first moment he had seen this crazy note. She would never write it wrong, Max said firmly. And there's this. And in the word goodbye, it's even deliberately like it's highlighted. See, I think she was trying to tell me something. All right, we'll take your opinion into account, replied the policeman, to inquire about the progress of the search. Call this number. If we have any important information, we'll get back to you. Goodbye. Goodbye, answered Max dejectedly, and went outside. It was early spring. The snowdrifts were settling and the sun was rising under the warmth of the tracks, and the first green grass was already sprouting near the wells. The sky was bluer before our eyes, and the birds were pouring in. But the joy that surrounded Max now had nothing to do with him. He was confused, frightened, and did not understand what had happened, and how their well-ordered happy life had suddenly collapsed. For the 100th time, he wondered what he could have done wrong. Maybe she was mad at him for something and had gone somewhere to a friend's hotel or wherever. But Chuck could not really abandon her little son. According to her mother-in-law, everything was fine yesterday afternoon. Maria stopped by with her stroller, as she often did after a walk. They did not live far from each other, so there's no way it could have been more than 15 hours since she supposedly disappeared. Also, this note is a strange, sloppy note with the word specifically misspelled. Something is not right here. And it's his responsibility to find out what it is, and to find his wife, to bring her home. With this mood, he returned to the apartment, where the crying mother-in-law had already managed to call all his friends and relatives. And again, no one knew anything. No one saw Maria. Max's parents and his older sister, whom he also notified when he returned home, were as dumbfounded as he was. His father and mother were already retired, and there was nothing they could do to help. They were only upset themselves. And his divorced sister was working 3 jobs to provide for her 2 schoolchildren. She only added fuel to the fire. Several years ago, she had an unfortunate affair with a scoundrel who left her and her 2 children and left, supposedly to earn money. And in fact, it is unknown where. After all, he hasn't had any alimony from him for a long time, and no alimony went to his sister. Here's your little brother, also lucky. With a bitter chuckle, she told Max. Hearing the news, I guess you and I are destined to pay for someone else's sins. What are you talking about? Emily? Max became indignant. Maria has never abandoned anyone. All right, maybe she dumped me for a minute, but that's ridiculous too. But she couldn't abandon her own son. You'd be surprised what women can do when they're worn out by loneliness. Sis snickered again. Imagine, she's always alone. The baby is always crying, whining, not sleeping at night. No one to help. So, and gone mad not long ago, that's ridiculous. Max is angry. First of all, she's not alone. When I come, I always take care of the artist myself, and my mother-in-law is with them almost every day. Secondly, she never said anything like that to me and never complained. And in general, well, what is wrong with it? It's normal for everyone to have problems with babies, and kids are all babysitting. And here's how you imagine everything. Bending his line sister. Well, we'll see. Fuck you. He threw the phone on the couch in anger, and the fact that he did not wait for sympathy from relatives. All he heard were accusations and stupid assumptions. None of them knew what was going on in someone else's family. Between him and his wife, no one has any right to accuse him of anything to do with Maria. He isn't. They love each other, and everything was fine, perfect even. Wouldn't she have told him if something like that had happened? Or maybe someone had told her some nasty things about him. Suddenly a thought occurred to him. For example, Kathy the breeder, a notorious jealous and gossipy. How many times has he told Maria not to talk to her? Maybe she's a jealous sissy, something he told her. We'll have to talk to everybody, find out everything. His head was spinning as he thought about it all. But no matter how he thought about it, there wasn't a convincing explanation for what had happened. And Maria at this time was already very far from her home and even from her native land. She had been drugged with psychotropic drugs and taken to a distant eastern country. And there was not a single chance that Max was able to find any trace of his so suddenly disappeared spouse. The events that resulted in such disastrous consequences for Maria and Max began a long time ago, when they did not even know about the existence of each other. Maria was a schoolgirl then, an ordinary 10th grader, and did not think about marriage or any serious relationship with the opposite sex. "Guys, I want you to meet our new student," said their class mistress that day. Along with her, a tall boy walked into the classroom. His unexpected appearance, causing a quiet commotion in the girls' half of the class. They then, waiting for the beginning of lessons, as usual, engaged in what everyone was doing. Chattering, spreading, chasing each other. With a wet rag, they sat on the windows, looking at the schoolyard. But as soon as the teacher came in, they scattered to their seats and got ready to study, or pretend to, as the case may be. This newcomer, however, amazed everyone. He was unlike any of them. The thin, straight features of his face might even have been called graceful if they had not been matched by those eyes. His eyes were not simple. They seemed to pierce through you, and it was as soon as he turned his gaze to his companion's face. He was immediately uncomfortable. So black were those searing, confidently calm eyes. They were unsettling and disconcerting. They seemed to contain a hidden threat, a powerful power, and something else that was incomprehensible and frightening. Even the teachers felt uneasy. What about the rest of us? The girls all went crazy. He was also incredibly handsome, like a movie actor off the cover of a Western magazine. A hot brunette. Yes, that definition certainly fit him better than anything else. Exactly searing. He lived with his gaze through the hearts and souls. So that's Damer, the classy Damer Al Jazeera said. "Let's try, guys, to make him feel comfortable with us. Come on in, Damer, have a seat right here." And she pointed to an empty seat next to Maria. He sat down nonchalantly in the empty seat. Calmly he took out his textbook and stood silently like a swarthy, beautiful statue. Maria waited for this strange guy to say something or at least look at her. But he didn't. For the entire lesson, he just sat there in suspense, staring past everyone. And only a couple of times something insignificant answered the teacher's questions. At recess, the school authorities of the boys' pack considered the main school, to which all the others tacitly obeyed. And torturing the newcomer was considered a sacred thing to do. "Hey, you, come here. We need to talk." The newcomer, standing at the window in a pose of utter contempt for the surrounding reality, did not even move an ear. And this way he also got deaf and angry teenagers. Something happened that no one could explain later or even understand at the time. But the crowd of schoolchildren who had gathered around suddenly discovered that two of the gangsters were already lying on the floor, and that the newcomer was kicking them. One of them had his knee to the neck, and the other had a knife to his throat. A real knife and a weirdly shaped blade. "Stay still. Jackals," the new guy hissed, "or I'll stab you in your fucking necks." The girls in attendance gasped in unison. Some wailed in hysterics, some rushed after the adults. A minute later, the gym teacher came running, desperately blowing his whistle. But there was no one on the floor. The two alleged victims were standing near the window next to the newcomer, peacefully looking at a book. On his hands, though, their faces were paler than usual. "What's going on here?" screamed the gym teacher. "Nothing is going on. I'm confused." The boys answered him, out of breath. "Me and my number were looking at a book." "Look, I was threatened by the gym teacher." "And you pointed your finger at Demur? Come with me to the principal." A thorough examination by the director revealed nothing. No traces of cold weapons or other prohibited items were found. The newcomer was let go, having been previously given a stern reprimand. But even the lethargic teachers, who had seen everything, felt uncomfortable. When asked if Demur understood everything about the rules of conduct in school, he looked at them as if they were slaves. And he was an emperor, in whose power to spare them or take their lives, right there and then. Needless to say, Within a week, not a single person in the school would have even thought to say a word against this newcomer. The girls were going crazy with all kinds of romantic delusions. Oriental prince, son of the Maharaja, hiding from persecution, that sort of thing. Nonsense. And the boys were the quietest of men in his presence. Because the incident with the knife suddenly appearing and passing at the right time was repeated a couple of times. Maria did not classify herself as a fan of the newcomer during the time they sat together at the desk, and it had been 3 weeks. He never said 2 words to her. But then one late afternoon she was walking near the school with her dog and a small dachshund, as she always did. She and her mother lived in the house next door to the school, and it was safer to walk around the sacred school perimeter because the neighborhood was far in view. That was the time. You could just see a gang running around. Before you knew it, you'd be beaten to death just because you got in the way. "Well, Molly, let's go home," said Maria to the dog, and decided that they had already walked enough, but she stubbornly dragged her mistress into the nearby bushes. And you did not hear him. He did not have time. Suddenly, 2 frightening shadows separated from the nearest wall and turned into 2 tall guys. Rolled up to Maria. "Oh, and a girl. What are you doing out here alone at night?" "I'm not alone." Maria's never been one to mince words. "I'm taking the dog for a walk, and my boyfriend's coming over." There was no boyfriend, but I had to do something to scare them off. They were charging. "Bold bird. But where's your Romeo?" "Let him go. We'll talk to him. And before he comes, we'll talk to you." And tenacious hands grabbed her by the shoulders and kicked the dog so that it rolled away far into the bushes. Tearing the leash from Maria's hands, it let her go. The demanding voice came so suddenly that it made the boys, already sick of their victim, loosen their grip and look away. There, Romeo blossomed into a smirk all by himself. Next, it was the same as in the school moment, and the 2 kissed the dirt. Only this time one of the scoundrels was out of luck in a big way. "Get out of here," the jackal grumbled through his teeth to the other one. "And don't forget to tell your friends how to behave. If I ever see you here again, you'll follow your friend." "You killed him in a stupor," said Maria, seeing that one has disappeared from sight and the other hasn't moved. "Death to the dog." Dammer said contemptuously and spat on the guy lying there. "Okay, I made a joke alive. He'll wake up soon enough. Let's go." "Wait, I have another dog here," Maria said, sensing how inappropriate that word was. He was obviously not a lover of 4-legged animals. She called out to the dog and ran over to it, glad to see that its owner was in one piece. Suddenly, Dimmer bent sharply and grabbed the dog by the scruff of the neck. "Let her go." Maria screamed. "What has she done to you?" "Don't yell," he answered her. "Look, she is bleeding. She has to see a doctor. Where have you been?" Mom spluttered when Maria and Molly finally got home. "I didn't know what to think anymore. Maria told me everything." Together, they decided it was better not to tell anyone about it. They didn't need the attention of the police. A few days later, there was a parents' meeting at the school. Maria's mother came home and called her daughter and told her that she had just seen Damer's mother. It turned out that she and I knew each other, or rather, we used to know each other a long time ago, before you were born. We lived in the private sector with your grandparents back then. Those houses were torn down a long time ago, and we were given an apartment here, and her family was moved somewhere else. We haven't seen each other since, but we got to know each other. We reminisced about our childhood. She told me about her father, Damer. After school, Jalil is his mother's name. She went to her distant relatives in Sacramento. She was going to go to college there, but while she was there, she met an Arab. He went to the Institute of International Relations there. They had an affair, but you know how it is. Her mother looked expressively at Maria, and she nodded embarrassedly. So the mother continued. She was knocked up by her Arab. She got pregnant. I mean, what to do? She came home, gave birth to a boy. Says he's just like his father. Their blood is hot, southern. And that Arab didn't give up. He must have had a crush on her. He looked for her. He looked for her for a long time. The boy had grown up, but just recently he says he found her. He wrote her a letter. He went back to his homeland a long time ago. I don't know exactly where. He says he got rich there. Now he has his own big business, and he's a wealthy man. She wrote back, telling him that they had a son. Then the Arab was very happy. A son is always like a gift from heaven. Even though he had a pond of his own from 7 or 8 wives, they have harems, but he still wanted to see him. Jalal took him to see his father in Sacramento. He flew there on business. They hit it off right away. Even though he's a boy, he doesn't speak any Arabic. In short, his parents had agreed that he would finish school here, then go to his father and study at the Arabian University. And if he liked it, he would stay there. I see, Maria said thoughtfully. That's why he is so strange. Why was he transferred to us? His mother inherited an apartment from her aunt recently. Her mother explained her here nearby. So she finally decided to separate from her parents. Do you think that's the reason? Maria said thoughtfully. I think with Damer's temperament, he hardly fits well in a team. That's true. They are all like fire, these Oriental men. You can't put a finger in their mouth. Mom agreed. You, my daughter, be careful with him. Okay, calm down, Mom. I'm not going out with him at all, Maria replied. Good, concluded her mother. There was the end of their conversation. But Damer's interest in Maria was not over either, although he remained silent. But from that memorable evening, he began to give her undoubted signs of attention. On March 8, he brought an elegant rose of a stunning blue color. Where did he get it? His father sends him a lot of money. There were whispers in the class, where various rumors about the newcomer had also reached. Maria tried to distance herself from the persistent suitor, but it was not going well. He shadowed her everywhere, always looming somewhere nearby. And when she tried to express her displeasure at this fact, he replied, I don't want anyone to hurt you. She had no choice but to nod, agreeing that for once she was very grateful. At the end of the year, the high school had planned a trip to Denver. A tour group was formed of high school students. Some didn't want to go, some couldn't. Some wanted to go, but didn't have the money. Maria's mother scraped together money for her father's alimony they hardly spent. And my grandfather and grandfather helped out. What did the two of them want? They managed to save some money that way. Already on the train, it became a lot of fun. A wave of vacation and school spirit swept over them. They were done with schoolwork and exams. Summer and an interesting trip lay ahead. Wouldn't that be wonderful? They were going on a trip, not to some compartment, like herrings to a bathhouse. And this time, Damer surprised everyone. He took his guitar with him and played different songs like a real musician. He had a beautiful, low, velvet voice and knew so many songs. Many of them had never heard of them. Maria suddenly saw Damer. From a new angle, his melodious voice was mesmerizing. And he was looking at her with such a thrill that she felt her breasts tighten. On that trip to the hotel, taking advantage of the lack of x-rays and a roommate in the room, he and Damer became close. You're my girlfriend now, he told her afterwards. I have no intention of giving you up to anyone. Do you hear? Yes, she said to him, looking with loving eyes. Yes, my love, I hear. Maria fell madly in love with him after all. Secretly, they met in different places in other people's apartments, which somehow Damer found. That same summer, he took her several times to abandoned dacha fields, and they were so good together. But one day, when Maria arrived at his house at the appointed hour, she ran into a very unusual-looking girl who was just coming out of the door. Who was this? Demanding, she asked, entering the apartment. To what? With a question for a question, he answered. What do you mean, what? Maria took offense. I have no right to know what kind of girl just left my boyfriend. No, you don't. He answered her calmly. I am not only your boyfriend, I am also a man. Men can have their own things to do. Ah, so pissed off, Maria, you know what, go to hell. I don't need this kind of happiness. You think I'm going to put up with your shenanigans? Don't even hope so. I won't live in a harem. Miriam tried to reassure her. Have you got it all wrong? Wait a minute. I'm not stupid, I understand. She screamed. You are just like your father. They say he has a harem, and so do you. I shouldn't have trusted you. My faith allows a man to have several wives, Damer admitted. but that doesn't mean that there isn't only one beloved among them. Harem is rather a tribute to tradition, you know. Be patient for one more year. You and I will finish school and we'll leave this place. Have you ever been abroad? No, I haven't. We'll live like kings with you. We'll see the world. Isn't it worth it? No, it's not worth it. Bitter, Maria answered him. It is not worth it. If you behave like this, I am not a toy. I am a living person. And I do not want to share you with anyone, even for the sake of tradition. You were the one who was getting ready to observe tradition with her. Damer didn't answer her. Silence. She cried with resentment and anger. So don't say anything. It is clear that you are guilty. Now you can do what you want. I don't want to see you again. Okay. And she left, slamming the door. And she didn't go back to school for the new school year. She transferred to college. She took some additional tests and she was accepted. She lost a year though. So what? It's no big deal. But not to go back to school and not to see the world again. True, he did not give up so easily and came and called and persuaded not to fool around. And one day, he was just a little bit away from the end of my last class. He came in the evening and said he was leaving soon, but that he would definitely come back for her. Maria was still hurt and suffering. Didn't even finish listening for slamming the door in his face. Soon he did leave. At least he didn't call or come back again. That first failed love affair. It left a deep bleeding wound in her young heart. And Maria could not recover from it for a long time. All remembered him, cried at night in the pillow, shuddered at every call to the door. But time is known to heal wounds of the soul. Especially in young hearts, that time passed unnoticed. Maria entered the institute after college, where she met Max. In their final year, they married, and the old scars fell overgrown and jinxed, leaving a faint trace. The next day, Max was supposed to return from his watch, and Maria, joyful, howled all day, clapping on the farm. Preparing to meet her husband, went to the market with a wall in the lower basket. The strollers were very handy for stacking heavy groceries. Then went to my mom for lunch. She came home, cooked various delicacies, changed the bedding, fiddled with the baby. Picky looked at myself in the mirror. Still looks good. No wrinkles yet. Stretch marks after childbirth, thank God, no. Figure great. Hair curly by nature is fine, then the gamer spouse chalky. Satisfied with the examination. She tried on some new underwear she bought the other day. Beautiful. Then the doorbell rang, and she set Chuck down in bed, threw on her robe, and went to open it, wondering who it could be at night. Who's there? No one could be seen through the peephole. Have you seen my cat? A woman's face appeared, speaking, loudly concerned, and looking around, called Kitty Kitty. Where are you, Archie? Maria pulled the door open on a chain. Yesterday there was a redhead running around, and he wasn't yours. Before she could hear what the woman who had lost Archie would say in response, the door shuttered with a mighty blow. The chain broke and two men in black masks, wearing stockings over their heads and military uniforms, burst into her apartment. They slammed the door, twisted her arms, and put a gag in her mouth. Said one of them, tearing off a piece of paper from the packet lying in front of the phone on the bedside table. Write a note to your own, and he showed her a sample on which was written what she had been forced to rewrite when one hand was free and a gun was put to her back. Now go, leave it where one of the strangers always ordered it. And come with us. Oh, look, no funny business. If you want your son to stay alive. Scared to death, Maria was literally wrapped in a thick black blanket, hiding everything but her eyes, and led out of the apartment, going down the stairs under escort of one of the visitors. She heard the other one call the other two apartments on their block and tell the neighbors to keep quiet about what they might accidentally see if they wanted to live. She was not allowed to take anything. No ID, no phone, no purse, no clothes, not the slightest trace of her former life. And most importantly, her baby Chuck, her son, her kitten. How was he alone there, sitting in the car where she had been shoved? She sobbed silently. The gag was still in her mouth. They only took it out when they brought her to a solitary house in a dark alley of private houses. My son, she screamed. How dare you? He's going to die there alone. Nothing will happen to him, she answered. One of the bandits will find him. Oh, you bastard. She screamed again. She came at him with her fists. She might as well have been hammering them against the concrete wall of the room, where she was immediately shut in. Apparently, the basement has no windows and the thick walls don't let any sound in. There is carpet on the floor, next to sofas, a nightstand, an adjoining room, toilets, a sink. Nothing else and no one else. In the morning, one of her captors returned. Without answering her countless questions and insults, he tossed some package on the couch and said, "Get dressed, in half an hour we are leaving." Immediately he went out again and locked the door. The bag was a hoodie and a warmer cloak of some kind on top. When he came in again and saw that she hadn't even touched her clothes, he called for someone. A minute later, a tall woman of remarkable physical strength entered the room. She calmly informed Maria that if she did not leave voluntarily, she would have to do it by force. And not forgetting her son. "We have eyes and hands everywhere," she added. "I had to get dressed. You're a woman too, aren't you?" Tried to get through to her. Maria, as they rode in the car again. "At least tell me where they were taking me." But they didn't dignify her with an answer. Instead, they gagged her again. She couldn't see through the tight robe. She gave the impression of an obedient Oriental woman following her companions. In this manner, they got out of the car and, gently supporting Maria on both sides, led her to the airport building. "Remember your son." The woman's minder hissed at her before the passport control window. They entered the VIP area, where the rules were apparently less strict. Mariam al-Jamahiriya, smiling radiantly, asked the customs officer, opening some kind of passport and not waiting for Maria to say a word, kindly gave it to the accompanying lady. Good riddance. Aha, what about the gloomy despair? Maria thought, already beginning to understand something when she heard that name from her distant past. Then she felt some slight prick in her shoulder, and further she remembered very vaguely. It seemed like they were still going somewhere, flying, still driving, maybe even sleeping somewhere. Or maybe it was just her brain exhausted from worrying about the baby. Her brain was asleep with the awareness of being awake. Finally, she returned to reality. Only in the luxuriously adapted bed shrouded and half-transparent idiot hay, and chickened some unbearable incense. She stood up on this bed and looked around slightly. Vaguely visible male figure sitting on a low sofa. Maria stood up, threw back her veil, and saw demur. "Hello, my love," he said to her, smiling. "See, I found you, as promised." She looked at him with hatred, clenched her teeth hard so as not to burst into tears of grief and despair. "I see that you have grown up to become a real beauty." Miriam praised her motherhood to your advantage. "I hope that you and I will have many more healthy and strong children. Allah willing. I hope you die soon." She hissed and spat under his feet. Oh, he laughed, still the same tigress as before. I know, my passionate Maria. But now rest, my dear. We'll see you later." And Max turned the whole town upside down looking for his missing wife. The police did nothing. Then he went to the prosecutor's office. They opened a criminal case for disappearance. And that's it. Well, what else can we do? The investigator from the prosecutor's office told him a couple of months later. The investigation did not yield any results. Unfortunately, everything we found out leads us to assume that she willingly abandoned you and your child. No, that can't be. Max shook his head stubbornly, and I'm going to find out what happened anyway. Nobody deprives you of that right. The investigator kindly agreed with him. Max turned to a private detective, and not in his own city, but in NY, fearing for the qualifications of local specialists to pay for the detective's services. Almost all the savings and a good portion of the still-to-come income went away. But that went nowhere either. However, the detective, if he had wanted to, could have told Magu something. But he was forbidden to do so, threatening reprisals against himself and his family. Now, all possible strings that might have led Max to solve the mystery of Maria's disappearance were severed. After a vigorous search that had kept him busy for some time and given him some hope, a period of indifference and depression set in. Max left for his shift again. It was time to go back to work, and he lived there like a robot, rising at the bell, eating at the right time, and going to bed like a machine. Turn off your own button, too. except that sleep did not come to him. Again and again, he replayed their life in his head, remembering everything to the smallest detail. Again and again he thought and tried to figure out what had gone wrong. What had gone wrong? But he did not have the only clue with which he could guess Maria's fate. Her mother Miranda, introduced by her daughter's sudden disappearance, had gone completely ill. She had been in and out of hospitals for the past month. She was of no use, since she had already had her second stroke and was confused about the present, let alone the past. When Max returned from his shift, he took Chuck away from his parents. Very grown up during that time and totally immersed himself in taking care of his son. He was the only one his baby boy was keeping his father afloat. But at times, Max just couldn't look into his eyes, so similar to his mother's. And then he would ask his parents to be with his grandson again, and he would go somewhere far away into the woods, into the fields, and wander there for hours, like a lost man. But he would always come back frozen or soaked, but bursting with energy to bear what had fallen on him so suddenly. Such recharging was very much needed. Max didn't drink or smoke, and he just couldn't see his friends now. There was no strength to explain, to tell, to listen to consolations. So they lived together, a father and a small orphan son, left without a wife and mother. Maria, the first few months in captivity, also raged, throwing herself at everyone, screaming and sobbing like a wolf, demanding that they let her go immediately, or at the very least bring her son back to her. "Bring me back the fiend," she screamed out of her mind, crushing everything around her. Finally, the period of violent rejection of the situation was over, and she realized that she would gain nothing in this way. Then she too, like Max, on the other side of Emily, became depressed and began to think about how to end her life. She made several attempts, but they all ended up going nowhere. At the last moment, someone would come into her room and not let her finish what she had started. So she guessed that her comfortable prison was equipped with hidden cameras. She searched, but found nothing and gave up. She simply lay down on her bed and prepared to die slowly and naturally, refusing to eat or drink at all. But they wouldn't let her do that either. They tied her to the bed and began force-feeding her through a tube after several such procedures. Maria became completely enraged and desperate and stopped resisting. One evening, the door of her chambers fell open and the lodge, which she had not seen for months, entered her again. "Hello, Mariam." She was silent and only looked at him with hatred. "I see you have calmed down a little," he said again. "What do you want from me?" she asked him. "Why did you steal me away? You separated me from my child, from my husband? And now you are asking questions." He nodded in satisfaction and sat down on the edge of her bed. "So you're ready to hear the answers." She was silent again and looked at him warily and expectantly. "I needed you all to myself," he said, to her softly. "Don't fight it, please. It won't get you anywhere. You understand that I have enough money and the opportunities it gives me to get everything I need." "Why do you need me?" she asked pitifully. "I bet you have lots of beautiful wives. Can't you let me go? Let me live my life." "No," he shook his head. "Our lives have been tied up since the first time you were my Maria. I didn't take you by force, did I?" "Yes," she sighed, and forced herself to admit it. "But I was still so young then." "No," again he disagreed with her. "You were a young woman." He smiled at some memory of his own. "You're the one who ruined everything between us." Maria persisted, unwilling to accept this terrible, alien position, so logical to him and so unacceptable to her. "I didn't ruin anything," he told her. "It was you who made it all up for yourself. That girl you saw was a courier for the agency where I rented an apartment for our meetings. Sent her in as a live advertisement. That's the kind of service they did. Business, nothing personal. I didn't use it the day you ran into her at the door." "Why didn't you tell me that then?" asked him Maria. "Quiet. I'm a man," he said proudly. "And I don't have to answer to a woman for everything, even the woman I love," he added. After a short pause, "How can you talk to me about love when you have done such a thing?" She went into a frenzy again. "And what do you think I did such a thing?" He asked her. "Stole me away against my will. Separated me from my family, from all my family and loved ones with my little child. Don't you understand how hard it is for me without him?" And she cried softly. "I'm burning to death." "Yes, I understand that." He put his hand on hers, but she took hers back. "It's like a hot fire. Of course, it is hard for you to part with your little son, and you are a good mother, Miriam. But you and I will have more children. You will be a happy mother again, and I'm supposed to forget my firstborn." She turned around. "Yes, sadly," he agreed. "You should, because he's not my son, and you're my wife, and you became one long ago voluntarily. That's the law. So why did you go away and leave me as your lawful wife?" Maria resented me. "I did not leave you. Didn't you want to come with me right away?" Damer answered. "It was easy. And at that time I had no opportunity to make you do your duty. And now you have every opportunity for my grief." Sarcastically, she smirked. "And not only as far as you are concerned," he replied. "What do you mean by that?" Maria was wary again. "Your first child will be well provided for. When he comes of age," Damer explained to her, "there is already a substantial sum in his account in my bank. At the age of 21, he can use it as he sees fit." "Do you think it will replace his own mother?" Bitter, Maria asked. "Of course not. But it will provide a decent start in life," Damer replied. "And if he manages his capital wisely, his whole life will be well provided for." "But can't we bring him here?" Maria asked me pitifully. "If you are not going to let me go, give me back my son, I beg you." "No," he shook his head. "He is not my child. It would be unfair to take him away from his own father, and to take his mother away from him," rightly resented Maria. "Not according to you, according to me, yes." Again Damer patiently, like a child, echoed her. "You are my wife, and by having a child by another man you dishonor me and my kind. If it had happened here in my house, I would have killed him and you, as our law requires. But it happened in another country, where other laws apply. So I just took you, like I have to. I will sit your life for you and for myself. A beloved wife can be forgiven what others are not forgiven." "Thank you very much," Maria replied sarcastically. "You know, I don't need this life without my child." "You need it for the sake of your child," Damer told her businesslike. "The terms of financing are valid only until you leave this life of your own free will. And if you change your mind and live longer, live peacefully. Here is my lawful wife. You might be able to see him in a few years, when he's older and able to accept the situation like a man and not a baby. His whole life will pass without me," Maria whispered in tears, "and I won't see anything." "I understand how sad this is," Damer said softly, "but it will make you feel better if you have other babies. Our children. You're just crazy." Maria screamed. "Do you really think that after everything you've done, I would sleep with you?" "You will," he said firmly. "Maybe not yet, but you will. You're my lawful wife. You come to me," and we felt the fire of anger in our eyes. "No," he shook his head, "no way. You will do it willingly and gladly, as you once did. You remember, don't you, my love?" Maria answered nothing, but threw a pillow at his head in a powerless rage. He caught the pillow on the fly and flashed a smile through his teeth. He laughed and left the room. "Tomorrow I'll send the maids to you." He tossed her a last message. "You mustn't sit here moping." The maids did indeed arrive the next day. They came in threesome early in the morning, opened the curtains and let in the sunshine. Her mistress would like a bath. "No," muttered Maria. "Mistress wishes to die. There is no need to settle accounts with life. Mistress, she is so beautiful," and the maiden smiled cheerfully. "For you, perhaps," Maria agreed with her. "Today we will take Mistress to her inner water garden, and perhaps she will change her mind." The second maid playfully informed her. Maria did not answer them. They fussed about the room, bringing in some unseen flowers with a pleasant fragrance. Then a tray of coffee, orange, juice, rose water for finger washing, various foods and sweets. "Let the mistress by." And they bowed and left the room. Maria wanted to throw this tray right out the window, but for some reason I changed my mind. She took an elegant cup of coffee that smelled good. She went to the window and looked out. A new day was blooming there. The sun was already high in the sky and soon promised to reach its zenith. Maria slowly drank her coffee and thought that perhaps she should go to that water garden. Perhaps there would be a loophole for escape. Now she gave herself wholeheartedly to the idea to escape from here, to pretend to be obedient and affectionate, and then to run away without a backward glance. Find the American embassy, ask for help. And another thought occurred to her. She would have to ask Dammer about it when he came to see her again. The water garden to which she was led after this late breakfast was a grand, elaborately designed funnel. The high walls were stepped down to the ground, and a slope was arranged in the ground itself. And this sort of natural slope converged gradually, steeply at first, and then more and more completely to the huge center of this grandiose structure of the complex of pools and ponds. They separated one next to the other, above and below and in the very depths, and seemed almost subdued in the air, supported only by fat supports, not weighty at first glance. Besides, there were still innumerable streams and waterfalls, and all this splendor and hiding in the sun. Things were flowing, dripping, not erupting and gurgling. Little lush vegetation of every possible color spread out here in lush carpets and picturesque groups. Glorious butterflies and sparkling plumage flew around. Birds chirped and sang even near Maria. Absolutely no mood to admire anything. Just took my breath away from such magnificence with amazement, and an involuntary smile on her lips. She looked around. There is in this man-made paradise. But after a few minutes, she made a frowning grimace. Dammer, who was watching her on the video monitor, laughed his head off. He immediately demanded from his staff a bottle of the finest champagne. He sent a second one to Maria's garden. The maid brought her a flute of champagne on ice and served it to her without telling her that it was not mineral water inside. Maria, without looking a little from drinking through a straw, stuck it in the illuminating drink and said surprisingly, "I did not ask for alcohol. This is from your spouse, madam. He sent you the best champagne in the world with his best wishes for your first day in his water garden." Maria grimaced again, but the champagne tasted so decently, so seductively cool that she reasoned the drink was not to blame for her woes, and stretched out on the comfortable chaise lawn. She drank her flute to the bottom. "Bless you, my dear." And Dammer, raising his glass, also drained it to the bottom. Then he went off on business, quite pleased with the way things were unfolding. And Maria spent a glorious day in her water garden, sunbathing, bathing in the many pools, serving various exquisite dishes and chasing back and forth servants who happily fulfilled all her whims and errands. But by evening, she again felt a pang of longing for her child and her former life. Sometimes she kicked out of her chambers, laid down in bed, turned on the big screen hanging in front of her, and began mindlessly switching different channels, most of which broadcasts something in Arabic. Soon she got bored with this activity and decided to go to the bathroom. However, she heard a tentative knock on the door, so she went over and opened it. I can't believe my eyes. How is it that the lock is unlocked? Is she no longer a prisoner? But when she saw the big man standing in the hall, she realized that this lock would be even more reliable than the old one, and there was no one else but him. "Did you knock?" she asked the guard. He shook his head, answering nothing. He did not know the language, or did not want to speak, and pointed his hand to a large round box, standing and a little to the side of the door, which Maria did not notice at once. She walked resolutely over and picked up the box, which was not heavy. Once inside it, she settled back on the bed and carefully opened the lid, decorated with a large broken bow. From inside, a little face looked back at her and again showed a pink, wet tongue. "Oh my God," marveled Maria, and pulled a Dachshund puppy out of the box. "How pretty are you?" she said to the little dog. "How cute." The puppy looked at her with lovely round eyes. It wagged its thin tail touchingly and suddenly, rising on its hind legs, moved its forelegs to Maria's breast, and licked her face with its soft pink tongue. Maria laughed and put the doggie down on the floor. "What should I call you?" "As if you," answered the puppy thinly, and made a little lie down on the luxurious carpet. Maria laughed again and pressed the staff call button. Immediately a maid came and cleaned up after the doggie, and then brought in special puppy diapers and put them on the puppy. "We'll wear them while they learn the rules of decorum," she informed Maria. And the puppy's newfound owner suddenly burst into tears. With her hands over her face, she burst into tears. She shouted to the maids and threw the innocent box against the wall. It had been 2 years since Maria disappeared, and Max, who had given birth to a son alone, decided to give him to kindergarten. At first, for a short time in a short-term care group, so that Chuck would get used to it, the boy grew up a perky and sociable child. And he seemed to even like it in kindergarten. Max took him in the morning and picked him up in the afternoon. Gradually, they got used to the new regime. The baby still went to kindergarten with pleasure. And during those months when Max went to work for them, his mother moved in. She watched her grandson. One day, when he was on watch, they had an accident on the platform. Not very serious, but it could have turned into a real disaster if Max hadn't spotted the tent in time and fixed it as best he could with his own resources. After that, he called for help, and the management was very appreciative of his actions. It turned out that the responsible worker had a suitable education, and Max was promoted. Now, he was already a senior engineer, and his salary increased many times over. A year later, he was offered to move to NY and to head one of the departments of an oil company, where he built his career, starting as a simple worker. Max accepted the offer with great enthusiasm. A change of scenery was just what he had been missing. He packed quickly and took Artyom with him. "How are you going to be there alone with him? And where will you live?" his mother lamented. "We'll rent an apartment for the first time. We'll put it up for sale," Max told her. "And for Chuck and the nanny?" "Yes, son." Yes, the boy agreed. "Only a beautiful one." "All right," the father laughed. "We'll have an audition at the new place." They settled in quickly, and things went well. The apartment sold surprisingly quickly, although realtors claimed with one voice that large housing is not liquid. In NY, Max bought a nice spacious apartment on credit. Not far from work, Chuck went to kindergarten, and a nanny was found, and even beautiful. That's what my son asked for. In short, their life was getting better. But on the personal front, Max was still a dead end. Psychological trauma prevented him from having relationships with women. For all that time, he had never even looked at one. In the 4.5 years she had spent in Damer's house, Maria had almost changed to her new circumstances. Some things she even liked, like being the strict and capricious mistress of an entire staff of servants, getting everything she needed at short notice. The longing for her son, of course, did not go anywhere, but smoothed out a little, faded away. Maria did not even think of running away now, for she had long ago realized that it was utterly unfeasible and useless here. In this eastern country, everything was not at all the same as in her now distant homeland. A couple of weeks after the first conversation, Damer brought her some papers in Arabic and English. "What is it?" she asked grudgingly, looking at the incomprehensible letters and the Arabic script. "Our marriage certificate and the document certifying your ownership of my property." Damer answered her. "Is that so?" She grinned. "Even on the property. And what are they?" "Our family assets are quite large at the moment," Damer said. "Stocks and bonds worth several $1 million, or rather, even several hundred $1 million, numerous properties all over the country. Not a bad car park, 2 farms, stables for Arabian horses." "I think that's enough," Maria interrupted him. "I don't even want to know what and how much of it belongs to me. I won't be able to use any of it anyway." "Why not?" "You can, if you promise to behave yourself and not to think about running away," Damer told her as if he had read her mind. "So, I can say go to Europe or anywhere in the country, but with an escort of servants and guards," Damer said. "For your own safety, and if I want to go to the USA to see my son," she asked hopefully. "I'm afraid that's not how. You understand?" She only took a deep breath, dear. "Perhaps we should try to have children together." He told her unexpectedly. "I can't even think about it," Maria replied. "And I'm afraid I never will." "What would you do in that case?" "Nothing," said Damer calmly. "I have enough children. I have sons and daughters. You need this child first of all. But I would be very happy for him too," he added, seeing how her beautiful face has changed, so think about it. "In the meantime, look at this." And he handed her another document the size of a passport cover. It turned out to be a passport. It had her picture and was written again in Arabic and English. Maria mocked her. She understood that without translation. "Let's go to France on the Côte d'Azur," he suggested her. "I've had a break in my business. We could spend a week in Nice or wherever you like, in good conscience. And if I run away from you..." Maria grinned. "Don't you have anywhere to run away to?" He shook his head as if with regret. That Maria who disappeared in the USA a few years ago no longer exists. She's dead. Dead officially. Now there is Mariam al-Javaketi, my lawful spouse and heiress to some part of my fortune. If you two try to run away, whichever part of Emily it is, my people will find you and bring you home. If you try to go to the American embassy in any country in the world, you will simply be considered insane. There is and will never be any documentary proof of what you say. Understand, Mariam, you and your life belong to me, and that is not as bad as it may seem," he added. Seeing that she was trying to object. "Wait though," Maria said. "And if, well, just suppose, if something happens to you through no fault of my own?" Hurriedly, she added, "No, but what if something happens to me? Would you become a wealthy and independent woman?" He said calmly, "And you will be able to do what you want. Now you will wish me dead." She looked into his eyes and said nothing. And Damer grinned and went to mind his own business. Time flew faster than a bird. Max and Chuck were celebrating Chuck's birthday at the Children's Club. He was turning 7 this year. He would be going to school in the fall. All in all, the party was a success. Judging by the happy faces, the kids and the cheerful eating moms, who, nestled around a large table with numerous snacks and drinks, were also having fun. Max, on the other hand, was sitting a little aside from them, blocking out the screen of his notebook. "Max, would you like to join us? We're drinking to your Chuck's health." One of the mothers came up to him, smiling happily. Of course, it would be quite rude to refuse because he invited them all himself. "Only I won't be driving alcohol." "Of course, we don't all drink either." The moms laughed. A lot of cabbies moonlight with their chats too. "Here's a glass, rather than red wine," said one of them, an interesting blonde in a short tunic. And pulling off their pants, I emphasize, beautiful shapes. "And what's in here?" Max inquired. "Blood." The blonde laughed. "But it tastes like cherry juice." "But if everyone has something to cheer with, then here's to your son's health," the first mother proclaimed. Yes, yes, cheers to his health. There were cheers of support. Max drank smiling cherry juice from his glass and set it aside. "Excuse me, I have work to do." "What kind of man goes missing?" Quietly, the first mother said to the blonde as Max retreated back to his table. "What do you mean missing?" asked the blonde. "Don't you know? He is raising the boy alone. Their mother died a long time ago. Look how handsome he is, and they say he earns money. That's great. Well, you can see he's still working," smiled the blonde. "And did you see his car?" And they went deep into a comprehensive discussion of the unquestionable advantages of the single dad. In an hour, everyone began to leave. Gone were the mothers who were themselves. They drove the kids, came to pick up the ones who were left here without their parents. Some just sent a cab for some. And finally, only one boy, James, was left. "Who's coming for you?" Max asked him. "Mama," the boy answered. "But she's not picking up the phone yet. Let's call her again." Max looked at the number and dialed it himself. The subscriber was temporarily unavailable. The answering machine of the cellular operator told him dryly. "Can anyone else pick you up?" Max asked the boy, who was about to cry. "Only grandmother. But she doesn't have a car. And she doesn't live here at all," said a confused James. Max thought about it. "Come on, you know what we'll do. You come with us. And when your mom can, she'll call us and pick you up." All right, agreed the boy. Max, and the case of both his and the stranger's boys, gathered up all the things and gifts they had brought and took them to the car, threw the bags and packages in the trunk, fastened the children in the back seat, and typed in the navigator the route to see that the traffic was all right. And it wasn't that far home by Moscow standards. He started the motor and drove off. Almost on the way to the apartment, James's mother called him and excitedly told him that she had been in a minor traffic accident and her phone had run out of juice, so she was unavailable. But now everything is back to normal, where she can pick up her son. And where are you yourself now? I asked Max outside the club. We're almost at our house. Maybe it's on your way. Yes, that's fine. Then I'll send you the location. He roused and dozed off in the ears of the boys already, informed James that his mother was all right, and she would be right there to pick him up, and took them to the apartment. About 40 minutes later, James arrived too. Mom dialed the intercom and went upstairs to their apartment. "Good evening," she said when Max opened the door. "Forgive me, for God's sake. I let you down like that." "Nonsense," Max replied, staring at her with his eyes wide open. The young woman reminded him subtly of his long-gone wife. He couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Her eyes and hair were different, and she was a little taller, but still something caught him. "Maybe you'd like to come in. The boys are watching a movie," he said. "I'm just making coffee." "Thank you." She smiled. "That would be fine." While she scoffed, he did pull out a can of black and grind coffee at the Café Silence, as always. Coffee machine. He didn't recognize it. It tasted very different synthetic. "Oh, you brew in a turkey?" She happily surprised we here, she stammered a little. "That's what we always do with James. Is he drinking coffee already?" Max was surprised. "No, I only put a little in his cocoa." She laughed. "Our dad used to make coffee like that. I got used to it." Max remained tactfully silent and did not ask any unnecessary questions, but just put a cup of aromatic strong coffee in front of her. "Thank you." She took it in her two palms and burned her Asian hands. 2 hours, waiting for the cops to come. I had to turn the engine off. The gas was almost out. "Do you need any help?" Max asked. "No, thank you, I can manage." She answered with a sigh. "Mommy, Mommy." James burst into the kitchen, followed by Chuck. Mom finally came home good. She hugged her son affectionately. "Of course I came for you. Now let's go home." "No," James said, "no. I want to spend the night at Chuck's. He invited me. We should go home." "Honey," his mother urged him on. "What about the rapper? He'll miss you." "All right," reluctantly agreed the boy. "But then can I still come to visit him if you want?" Tactfully said his mother. "Then you can." "Of course you can." Chuck perked up. "Don't we, Dad?" "Of course," said Max, smiling broadly. "Come and the rapper takes over." "Oh, Phantom doesn't like to go visiting," laughed Mom. "He usually sits in a cage." "Yes, and tells me James is a good one," the boy reported. "He can talk because we taught him." "It's a parrot," said James, Chuck's mother. And seeing his bewilderment, "Come to us to meet him." Sure enough, they came a few times, paid mutual visits. So to speak, the boys became very friendly, and the parents didn't mind chatting either. It turned out that they too had had a tragedy in their family. A couple of years ago, James, the father, had died. An accident. Lissa was James's mother, and the baby were left alone. Soon she and Max began to meet, and a year later they got married and built a country house, where there was room for both the boys and themselves. Lisa was already expecting her second child. By this time, Maria, or rather Mariam, the venerable, married Oriental lady, had another boy, a son. Yes, she finally surrendered to the mercy of the victor. Tired of being angry, sad, and hopeful. Life has taken its toll after all, and this child is now everything to her. Replacing her long-lost son, the boy was named Poshol, and Daumer even allowed her to choose a name for her son, an unheard of honor for an Oriental wife. From a long list of Arabic names, Maria chose one that would allow her to call her son American. She had not quite forgotten her native language and customs. At home, she called him John, and Daumer did not object and only smiled affectionately, watching his Maria stealing over the baby. Maria had long since been introduced to the court, that is, introduced to the rest of Daumer's 12 wives. And all of them, just to think, would get down on one knee at this and kiss her wrists as if she were the queen. And so it was, in fact. After all, the first wife in the East, the queen of the harem, in ordinary life, did not encounter or cross paths with the other wives, just knew of their existence, and that's all. Each had her own rooms in that huge house, her own inner gardens, but posh and bigger than she had. Maria finally got used to her new life and was even proud of it. And the former distant, shaky turned to fog and gradually melted away like a distant half-forgotten dream. Only one request for a man from the past was fulfilled by Damer, took care of Maria's mother, organized her flight, and the best treatment that money could buy. The old woman was already poorly oriented in the world around her. But Maria, when she came to the hospital, recognized her and wept for a long time over her unfulfilled life. For a full 15 minutes until she completely forgot. Who was this woman sitting in front of her? By the time Maria had John, her mother recognized no one at all and was quietly living out her life with all the comforts of home in a fancy nursing home. More like Mariam's fashionable resort. "I love you very much," Damer often told her and showered her with expensive gifts. She smiled at him a little fondly, a little condescendingly. She never forgave him until the end. But as the years passed, she came to the conclusion that perhaps it was her destiny. She couldn't help it, the way things had turned out. No one really forced her at the time. She had fallen in love with the strange Oriental boy and decided her own fate. And now she had everything she could only dream of, and every whim was fulfilled at the snap of her fingers. Damer kept his word when in their distant youth promised her we would live with you as kings. So now they lived. She remembered her ex-husband, Maha, with indifference. And later she came to the conclusion that she had never really loved him. And it was true that the calm and even feeling that had accompanied her life with Max was nothing compared to the storm of passion that had always boiled over between her and the world. Even now, years later, she was all wishy-washy when he touched her. He was right about that too. After living a long time in the East, Maria began to think differently too. She had almost fully embraced the local customs and traditions and was no longer surprised or angry that here life was ruled by men, and a woman had to obey and obey. But not in everything either. There were joys and indulgences. Here she was, one would think fabulously lucky. That was the ceiling of the domestic career of an Oriental woman. To become the beloved late wife of a wealthy husband. Over the years, Damer did not change his attitude toward her. And even after the birth of his son, he changed his will, signing the largest and most significant part of his fortune to him. When the boy was 16, his father sent him to study in Great Britain, so that the boy learned English well and did not lose face in the future in front of business partners. Mom would tell her John in English by calling home. He always spoke English to her, and her father didn't mind. "Do you have any idea how beautiful it is here? Everything is so neat and tidy. We used to take us to Surrey to see the sea too, and it's a different kind of romantic here. Son, you're a poet, like Lord Byron." Maria laughed, delighted with her son's enthusiasm. "Come with Daddy to visit me. You promised before the vacations. Please, we'll take you for a walk in London. I'll show you around." He asked her another time, "And then we'll fly home together. We're on vacation. Will they let us go?" "I don't know." "Son, you have to ask your father." Mariam always answered completely in the tradition of the East. This time my father didn't mind. In fact, he, when it came to his son or Mariam, most often did not object, and sometimes even yielded to requests. Only in a low-key way, so that rumors would not spread about his excessive loyalty. "How lucky are you?" Mariam was often told by one of her younger wives, with whom Maria had become friends through her love of small dogs. They often went to visit each other and enjoyed the peace and comfort of the water garden. "Mariam, Master is so fond of you. Even when he comes to us with the diamonds, he talks only about you. Ali, I have been brought up in the traditions of the East since childhood. I would never even think of jealousy. It was simply unacceptable in relation to the main wife. She was only to be admired as an inaccessible deity. And the younger wives knew their place and rejoiced in what they had. It should be said that they, too, had quite a lot, and they had every reason to be happy." Maria only smiled patronizingly, stroking her dachshund, and in turn, politely asked about the progress of her son Ali. In London, she was allowed to take off her shawl, and Damer, too, changed into a civil couture suit, and they became just rich tourists who came to England for the weekend. We took John out of college. The three of us walked leisurely through the streets of London, taking in the main sights. It was a wonderful trip. At a restaurant, John suddenly saw some kids he knew from college and asked his father if he could come over and say hello. Come on, Damer generously said he could. And he went to a nearby table where a noisy flock of students was rocking the party. There were some girls there too. But here in this foreign country, one did not pay too much attention to such things. They weren't righteous. What could they do from their place? The parents watched their son as a tall, handsome, young man inherited from both of them. Only the best features laughing merrily and chatting with the boys, not forgetting, however, his own dignity and the fact that a man of his circle should not drink alcohol in public. How wonderful he turned out to be, Maria said with tenderness and pride, and Damer shook her small hand affectionately. And you are wonderful, he said to her and kissed her tenderly. Father, mother, I'd like you to meet them. John came to their table with some girl. Pretty, graceful, smiling, her little nose was studded with freckles. And it was so cute that Maria involuntarily smiled. This is Nancy, said the son to them. And you know, she's American, just like you, Mom. Hello. A little embarrassed, the girl told them. Hello, my dear, Miriam answered her. And Damer tilted his head slightly and smiled. Do you study here or did you just come to rest? I'm studying. I have 2 more years to trumpet here. Nancy laughed. My father won't agree to take me home. He says an education here is more useful to me in life. Your father is absolutely right, Damer told her seriously. He is a smart man and you should listen to him. Of course, Nancy was taken aback when she listened to his teacher's tirade. I don't mind that much. It's more my mother who gets upset. A man knows best what's good for his children, he said suddenly. It was so important that Maria heard his fatherly intonations in his voice. And just like him, she saw Damer, who she had met as a boy many years ago. These memories stirred in her a long-forgotten feeling, and tears came to her eyes. And Damer, proud of his son, smiled approvingly at him and noticed nothing. Maria dabbed her eyes with a napkin and said she was tired and wanted to go back to the hotel. Her husband didn't mind. They caught a cab and left, and John asked to go out for a little while longer. He came back late, and Maria, fearing his father would be angry, quietly told him off. Where have you been, John? Can you see what time it is? Be thankful your father is already asleep. Otherwise, he would not have given you an armor. Asked the boy. I'll ask his forgiveness. Nancy and I had so much fun this morning that we didn't want to sleep at all. Do you like her? Maria smiled. And again, she remembered herself and Damer at that age. She thought of herself and Damer at that age and was horrified at how these children could behave in the same way. Are you seeing her? She asked her son worriedly. How long have you known her? No, Mom, we just met today, John laughed. Don't worry, we haven't slept together yet. John shouted sternly. Mother, okay, disarming. He put his hands up in the air. I was kidding. But actually, yes, I really like her, and I'd like to marry her. Oh, son, you've got to study first. Sure, Mom, but you know what? That Dad, and I also have a hereditary interest in American women. Is that what he told you? Maria laughed. Yes, after all, my grandfather also loved American women. I knew that. I heard something like that grudgingly, Maria confessed. Now let's go to bed. It's about time. John had always been an obedient son. But Maria, like any mother, was very worried about him. Now he was alone here without his family in this strange country, where the order was very different. She wondered if he might do something that would make his father angry. What would happen to him? In the morning at breakfast, she cautiously shared her fears with her husband. That's a funny Maria, he told her. You're worried about a boy who's getting married soon. That's exactly what I'm worried about, she sighed. What if he chooses the wrong girl? What if she makes him miserable for life? Damer didn't shake his head. Everything will be fine. You'll see. Let him get his own bumps in the road. He's a man, and he has to act like one. But you won't be angry with him in case he is our son. Gently, Damer told her. And no matter what happens, nothing will change that. After this conversation, Maria calmed down a little. 2 more years, while John attended a British college, passed quietly and measured. as they always did when his parents came to visit him at graduation. A joyful son greeted them in his college dress uniform and his traditional graduation cap. So there you have it. He turned in profile, very much like his father and your all-grown-up son. Maria smiled a little sadly. "I have a surprise for you," my son told them. And his eyes shone with joy. "We have one for you too," said his father, and handed you a whole small box. When he opened it, he saw there the keys to a brand new Ferrari. "Thank you, Father, Mother." The boy hugged his parents. "Come on, I want you to meet someone." "This is Nancy," he said. "It's a pleasure to introduce you to my future wife." "Good morning," she smiled. "It's nice to see you again. We met here a couple of years ago." "Yes, we did. We just met. Do you remember?" John asked. "I remember, and even answered Maria very well." Such a girl is impossible to forget. Gallantly, as always, bowed to the world. "You are very kind." "Thank you." She smiled again and offered her hand to her future mother-in-law, who politely kissed her in the European manner. The ceremony is about to begin, and we should be in our seats in the faculty formation. And afterwards, we'll introduce you to Nancy's parents. They came today too, and John and Nancy ran off, promising to come right after the graduation ceremony. What do you think? Maria, concerned, turned to her husband. "Pretty girl." Dammer smiled. "Let's see more of her parents." The ceremony lasted an hour and a half, and Maria liked it very much. The message was among the speakers, to the joy and pride of parents. Then a small buffet was organized, and everyone was invited to the tables, set in a large tent in the open air. Mom, Dad came up to them. "John, come on, I took you a seat at our table. Meet Nancy's parents. Good afternoon, hello. Nice to meet you." The traditional exchange of courtesies began without Maria, who on her way to the table caught her heel on something and trying to get rid of the interference, that a little late. Where are you, my dear?" A little reproachfully reprimanded her Domer. "Let me introduce you to my wife and the mother of your son Miriam, very nice," she said, extending her hand to a beautiful, well-groomed lady about her age. "Glad to be late." She shifted her gaze to her husband, and the words stuck on her tongue. The memory tape seemed to instantly rewind back in time, and straight into her eyes looked Max, her ex-husband. "Maria," he asked the floor, not taking his eyes off her questioningly. Demur and Lisa, Max's wife, also sensed that something strange was going on, and only the children were too busy with each other to notice anything at all. "Do you two know each other?" Lisa asked Max. Smiling tensely and shifting her gaze from him to this strikingly beautiful woman, who looked nothing like a representative of the mysterious East. Apparently so, Max muttered, still staring intently into the eyes of John's mother. Maria asked him again in amazement, "Is that really you?" "Yes," I nodded. She came to her senses a little. "But my name is Miriam now. Miriam Al Jazeera Dick," she added firmly, as if her current name was supposed to explain something. "I see, gentlemen, that the situation is a little unorthodox," calmly remarked Demur. "Wouldn't it be better for us to retire?" Darling Maria looked up at him. "As you see fit." Dryly, she replied. No, please," Lisa suddenly asked. "We are all civilized people. Let's talk and sort things out." "I would prefer to have this conversation in private," Max said. "That is impossible," Damer shook his head. "Our laws do not allow a married woman to communicate in private with a married man, even if this man is her ex-husband," Max specified with ill-concealed anger. Even so, calmly, Damer responded, with his arms crossed over his chest. "And parents, what is going on here in exile?" Nancy didn't understand what was going on. "It's nothing special. Daddy just met some old acquaintances," Lisa answered her daughter, smiling serenely. Delmer looked at the woman with obvious approval. Maria, on the other hand, sat in shock. Only by a great effort of will could she control herself. She was well aware that she had to control herself and not to compromise the honor of the family, whatever it cost her. Suddenly, she felt her husband's large and warm palms squeezing her own under the table. Cold as it was, breathing it without verbal support calmed her a little, and she responded to that handshake from him. "Then we'll have to talk right here. Is that all right with you?" Max looked around at everyone present. Damer assured him somewhat. "Please," Lisa answered. So after all these years, Max began, in a trembling voice. But Donner, who had ordered the waiter in advance, immediately put a glass of whiskey on ice in front of him. "Please help yourselves here," and lifted his own. "It's very good right now." Max mechanically tipped the contents of his glass and continued, "After all these years that I thought you were dead. You show up like this without warning." "I didn't know I was going to meet you here," Maria said quietly. "It could hardly have been part of our plans." "All right, so be it." Max agreed, "But you could have at least written to me. Didn't you care about our son?" "Relaxed, darling." Lisa, too, took her husband's hand and smiled cheerfully at him. All was well, of course, cared. Tears came to my eyes, but I couldn't tell you anything. It was him. Max suddenly jumped up from his chair. "Did he do it? Steal you away from us?" "No," Maria answered him firmly, looking him straight in the eye. "It was my choice. You see, only mine. And now I ask you to forgive me for that." She felt her husband's handshake under the table again. That's how Max let off some steam, calmed down a little. "So then, Chuck and I didn't mean anything to you. You meant everything to me quietly," Maria said. "But I was already not free when I met you. It was my mistake. And I am monstrously sorry to you and to my son too." "Mother what?" surprised John, who, not understanding anything, twisted his head back and forth. "I have a brother in the USA. And Nancy?" He looked at his girlfriend with horror. No, darling, calm down." Maria hurriedly told him, "Your Nancy is not my daughter." Completely confirmed with an ironic smile, Lisa agreed. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand anything anymore." With surprise, said the girl. "Who's here? Who's who? Can you explain it to us?" "Let me try," Damer said softly. "So many years ago, Maria and I were in the same class. You know that your grandmother is also from USA, John, right?" "Yes," the boy confirmed. "You told me." So Damer nodded. "Your mother and I fell in love, but we had to break up because of a misunderstanding. I went to my father, but later, after a few years, I found her and brought her to my house, as I had to. True, over the years she managed to marry your father. Nancy." Damer turned to the girl, and they had a son, Chuck. He is a sibling to both of you. Nancy by his father, John by his mother. As far as I understand, he's not here right now. Chuck stayed home, Lisa nodded. And James too, and James John looked at everyone in surprise. "James is my brother too, but he's not your brother, you know?" And Nancy, unable to stand the general tension, laughed out loud. And John joined her. The children, called them to order. "Damer, let me finish. I realize that your family tree now looks more like an Indian movie, but still, well, there's not much left. Maria, and now Miriam is my beloved wife. And as a result of our love, we have you, John. And as far as I understand, the esteemed Max has also tied his life to a worthy and beautiful woman." He politely bowed his head to Lisa, and they became the parents of your lovely young bride, Nancy. Yes, boy did John agree. "But you parents give, John," Maria said reproachfully. "Please express yourself in a more acceptable way." "I'm sorry, Mom, I'll try." He lowered his eyes politely, but his lips spread into a smirk. "It's wonderful that we have it all figured out." Lisa uttered with relief, "I'm glad Chuck's mother is alive and well. I suggest we drink to our acquaintance on that occasion." "Thank you," Maria said gratefully. "I will not refuse it." She looked at Damer and waited for his approval. He nodded and filled her glass and Lisa's too, with the wine from the bottle brought by the waiter. But Max, who, unlike the others, found nothing good or amusing in the situation, suddenly said firmly, "My daughter will not marry your son." Daddy Nancy cried out and looked at her father with fright. "What is wrong with you?" "Vasia and I have nothing to do with it." "We really are, darling." Lisa looked at her husband. "The children are not to blame for anything. Do you want our only daughter to suffer all her life and be tormented like her?" And Max pointed at Maria with a trembling hand. "Look at what they've turned her into in there, an obedient robot." "Max, what do you think you were doing?" Maria finally became indignant. "I already said it was my choice. Didn't I? Max squinted. Then how do you explain the mistake in the note? You do remember, don't you? You wanted me to find you and not deny it. Yes, then I wanted to calmly admit it. And even later I wanted very much, and to run away too. But as time passed, I realized that everything was right. Everything was the way it was supposed to be. I chose my destiny, and it found me. I regret. My only regret now is that I didn't tell you about everything before we got married. If you had known, it probably would have made a difference. And now I don't care at all. And you, Daddy, don't forbid me to make my own choices too. If, of course, you love me, she added, touching her father's hand affectionately. You can do as you please, Max said dryly. Do what you want, live in a harem, suffer, perish. After all, it will be your choice. After all, she will be my beloved wife. And he hugged Nancy affectionately. And what do you say, Lisa? He turned to his mother-in-law. I say this. She smiled. From everything I have seen and heard today, I have come to this conclusion. I don't know if your esteemed parents, John, would approve of my conclusion, but I will say it nonetheless. So personally, I am sure that in every corner of our globe, regardless of religion, nationality, people, or their way of life, there is only one thing that really matters. What's the one thing that's of interest? John asked. Love, answered Lisa. So I wish you, my dear ones, true love. It alone rules everything. At these words, Damer stood up respectfully, bowed to the woman, and applauded. Bravo! I could not have said it better. And as if in confirmation of these wise words, a sudden volley of magnificent fireworks sounded nearby, painting in the sky 1,000 multicolored glittering lights,